about a year after I started with KCF, I thought about it, and my uncle Rob, who lives 45 minutes from here, he used to run maintenance for a paper mill. And I called him and I said, hey, can you tell me more about what it was like to run maintenance at the paper mill? And he's telling me about it. He worked all 3 shifts. And I said, well, how did you know if something was going wrong, right? I wanted to hear it from him because he would be brutally honest with me. And he's like, I could just hear it. I could walk up and I could listen, and I knew it. Sometimes I'd put a screwdriver up to the machine. I'd hear it if it sounded like rocks, it's cavitation, this, that. So, okay, how's the next generation of employees knowing what's wrong with the machine? He's like, they don't. He goes, but we got all these college educated, use maybe a curse word in there, guys coming around with their computers, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I'm like, really? I'm like, tell me more about that. So he tells me more about it.
This is after you started at KCF?
Yeah. And he goes, well, what are you doing now? And I'm like, oh, I'm kind of one of those college educated guys walking around with a computer.
Yeah.
You know?
We're always collaborating at all times with the universe.
I'm excited to be here.
Dude, I'm excited to have you here.
I actually thought Rogan was going to be my first debut, but this is just as good.
I'm just trying to pluck them where I can, just trying to get the people that I can get when I can get them. Trying to, get in where the getting's good, basically.
I get it. Is this water or vodka?
Water.
Okay.
But I do have bourbon if you want some bourbon.
I'm good with water.
So yeah, dude, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. We've been working together professionally for, I guess you and I didn't really start working together until after the summit last year. I feel like we didn't really start linking up until Chobani, and that was August.
Yeah, I think maybe we kicked off in April though.
Well, we were doing stuff like mildly. Like I remember you came up to me when we were doing the June summit last year, and you were like, "Hey, can you make sure you can get some photos of the people that are outside or whatever?" And that was like my first actual interaction with you in person. I was like, "Oh yeah, I already got it." And you were like, "Oh, you already got it? Yeah. Oh, okay, all right."
That was me in director mode.
Yeah, for sure.
When there's an event, it's you turn on.
Yeah, your level of fun just dissipates from here to here. But if I can get you in Bangor, Maine, that guy he rages. So that guy goes nuts.
Those stories stay in Maine.
It's like Vegas, yes, regionally.
Yes, very different.
So you are the VP of marketing for KCF Technologies, but you've got kind of a long. You've come from several places before that. So your experience with the marketing side of things, were you mostly PR before? Or did you kind of?
No, most all my career was marketing. And I spent nearly 12 years at Honda Motor Company, which is quite some time.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, my first exposure to marketing was really social media. And
in what way? How was it that's your first foray into it? So, yeah. I mean, 10, 11, 12 years ago, that was yeah, Facebook was out. That was kind of Instagram was definitely starting to become a thing.
Yeah, I think it was 2014. We were doing a lot of Instagram, a lot of Facebook. Twitter was doing well. Snapchat had just came out. Maybe into 2016, TikTok started being a thing. But that short form content, viewing things through a different lens and long format, really started to, take off.
You were at Honda whenever that started to happen?
Yeah, I was in charge of their social media.
Yeah, I feel like the bigger brand companies like that they kind of embraced it pretty easily because it was probably easier to reformat and reconstitute, content that you were creating and putting it in that short form content. You just had to have the eye for it. And now the eye has been shifting since the pandemic and everybody having to spend more time on their phones. So it's really interesting to me to see how you view short form content because you came from the period of time where it wasn't that specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were at the forefront for sure. I mean, us and a bunch of other Fortune 500 companies had a ton of money to experiment, right?
Right.
So we could try the new things on Snapchat. In fact, we were always beta testing things for Snapchat. TikTok, we were one of the first on there doing things that were completely different, but making content specifically for that platform, which is kind of unique, right?
Yeah. Is it weird now that you're in a position where you're doing more B2B style marketing where you're I'm here to try to help your business. Here's how we do it. It's not the same as hey, here's this Honda car that looks slick and here's these flashy imagery. I got to do some work on some Audi commercials and stuff like that. And I had a friend of mine who was working on one that he was given cell phone footage that he had to turn into commercial grade footage to use for something. And he was it took some work. He was like, I had to really finesse it, massage it to make it work. But it's easier, the car is like, that's like the staple thing that everybody's always longing after. You want this car, that motorcycle, that house, whatever. It's like a possession thing. But for KCF, it's not like that at all. It's like, hey, who do I got to talk to at this business to save them a shit ton of money? Like, how can I get in there and help them out?
Yeah, it's interesting. Even though we were doing social media back then, we were doing it with all the professional equipment, directors, producers you would expect. Transitioning that into other projects I worked on there at really large scale for national television, and then coming to KCF, the biggest thing that's different is resources, right?
Yeah.
Come from having all these resources to being kind of a Swiss Army knife is like what I like to refer to it as. But the fundamentals are all the same. Definitely going B2C is way more fun.
Yeah.
Especially when you have all the budget to do it.
Right.
When you switch gears to B2B, you have to be a lot more crafty. I actually believe it makes you a better marketer.
Yeah.
It's more challenging.
Yeah, you have an uphill battle to climb. You got to learn how to do more with less, almost essentially, and that can kind of hone in the skills that once you do eventually get more resource pool to kind of work with, you can do more damage.
Yeah, it's just like an investment portfolio where you have your IRA, your 401k, your savings account. You just got to figure out what performs best and put more eggs in that basket. I mean, that's the reality of B2B.
Yeah. Do you feel like you are given access to enough of the resources or tools to be able to do that in your position? Because I feel like that's the bottleneck that I notice most companies that aren't doing like a consumer product end up being throttled with, is that they don't allocate enough resources towards this thing. And I'm a big advocate that, specifically and especially in 2023, that like if you're a company of any kind and you're doing any sort of service, you need to have a percentage or some sort of a budget allocated towards taking care of what is going to become essentially your marketing, your recruiting tools, all of that. Because like I think when you're looking at the marketing perspective as, oh, we're marketing to sell a product, it's totally different than when you're looking at it like, well, yeah, but we can repurpose a lot of that content into the recruiting aspect as well to get people into this company to help it grow. And I feel like that's like an angle that a lot of companies I think miss. Especially, I mean, I guess I'm probably like traumatized from it locally because everybody that wants video work done in this area doesn't expect to spend anything on it, and they're pretty convinced that their cousin who's got a new iPhone can totally do it. And so thankfully I just don't even engage in those conversations, but it is like a real tangible problem that is, kind of rampant in definitely smaller company realm, but I guess like in a tech, entrepreneurial kind of a startup, KCF feels like a startup. I know it's not, but like it feels like a startup in vibe. So do you notice that that's kind of like something that you run into, or? Yeah,
the way you described it, like, do I have enough resources? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You got to make the most of your resources. And the way I look at it is you always start with the end in mind, right? Like, what's the final product we want to deliver that'll help increase sales or lead to a business outcome?
Right.
So we always do that. And then you work backwards. It's like, okay, I have this one piece of content. How can I turn it into 12?
Yeah.
And that really comes back from the social media days. I really believe that was one of the best career experiences I ever had, because you have multiple platforms. You have multiple ways of delivering content, whether it's stories, organic posts, native posts. Like, how do you deliver on all of those things with one great piece of content? You begin with the end in mind. How does it fit and live on all those different platforms? So we really adopt that. The key, though, in B2B, because many people are resource restrained, is having the right people. We have one of the best teams that I've ever worked on or worked with in my life. We have a young lady, Zoe, Elia, Lisa, and then some part-time support. We have you. We contract for key pieces. It's the people that deliver the best product. And being that we have experts in each discipline, we definitely have enough resources.
Yeah, well, I got to give a special shout out to Zoe, obviously, because she is the forefront runner of the reason why we started doing work together. We started with some product photography and videography for you guys last year, and that was like just like a start. And I was like, oh, cool. She hit me up out of nowhere. I was like, hey, we're trying to do this thing. Would you be interested in doing this? And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I'll never forget when she came to me and said, hey, I have this guy, Johnny. She didn't say my friend Johnny. She just said, I have a guy, I think is what she said. But she's like, yeah, he does sports. He's a musician. And I think she rattled off a couple other things. And I'm like, that's like the most interesting man in the world. Like, let's get to know him.
Yeah, I hope I lived up to the hype.
You did.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah,
I'm kidding. I mean, after spending how many hours in the car together, you certainly lived up to it.
well, that first trip we took to Chobani was an absolute blast. Like we weren't like we got there and we we turned Applebee's into Club B's.
Club B's.
We were there till like I don't even remember what time. We were till like 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock, and then we didn't shut it down, but we could have if we wanted to. And then
Bullets and Brews was my favorite.
that was the best part. Yeah, well, we had what was like an hour and a half, 2 hour drive to get to wherever we were going. We went from Boise to wherever it was that we were for Chobani's.
Somewhere in Idaho.
Yeah, somewhere in Idaho. And then randomly, I just sent you that picture the other day, the Shoshone Falls. I was actually there. I don't remember when. I just remember I was like on a tour and we must have heard that it was like, oh, the Niagara of the West. Let's pull over. And we pulled over and it was actually, lived up to the hype as opposed to the piss trickle that we saw when we stopped out. We were like, maybe global warming's real. I don't know.
Yeah. It was a dead giveaway when we pulled into the national park and the windows were boarded up and the sign that said $5 for parking. There was nobody to collect parking money.
Yeah, nobody's collecting the parking money. That wasn't during that was like post-pandemic for the most part. I think they're open at that point. Yeah,
it's 2022.
Yeah. So
it was boarded up because there was nothing to see.
They're like, don't come here. Don't. We're sorry.
Been a U-turn sign on the way in.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of gotten into the rhythm of things a little bit, I feel like this year the pace has shifted drastically from where we were last year, and it started when we did the video for St. Croix Tissue and University of Maine, which was like already kind of like an interesting project that when you pitched it to me, I was like, okay, I see the value of the story. Like for me, storytelling is like the number one thing. Right. And so it's such a fine, needle to thread when you're trying to, I mean, we had significantly less interviews that time than we do, for example, for this Georgia Pacific shoot, and threading the needle for that was a little bit easier. This one I'm noticing as I'm in the edit and I'm like in the process of combing through everything is a little bit more challenging just because of the way that everybody spoke.
Sure.
And so, but I still enjoy it. And so forever I have loved like numbers, putting puzzles together and just like, and it's hard to differentiate because how much of that is just like, okay, people do those things, calm down, you're fine. And then how much of them are like, yeah, but I obsess over them. And so for me, my OCD, my like meticulous attention to detail is I think what helps me shine as an editor, but it can be, I think, a pain in the ass for some of my clients because I'm like, I won't turn an edit over until I'm convinced that it's in a really good spot already so that by the time they are, especially in your guys' case, you guys have clients you have to review it with. Mm-hmm. And so when you're doing something like that, I'm like, I want to eliminate a lot of the back and forth that can come from like the revisions and notes and things like that. And I specifically dealt with this like while we were in Atlanta with Formula One and the Wall Street Journal. And that was like, it was abysmal to deal with it because they didn't understand what they were giving me and how it works. And I don't know how to explain video editing to somebody who has just their title has nothing to do with it. They just have access to resources and can send you some videos and they're like, do something with this.
Yeah, I think, we talked about this before. I think every client's different, right? So like some have some creative ability to see what the end will look like. Right. And then others struggle to see that. And that makes your life more challenging. Yeah. Right. So I think every time we see a rough edit, I know where you're headed, right?
Yeah.
We're pretty well aligned with what that looks like. But certainly some clients might not have that same lens
at all.
That's probably where you run into challenges.
Yeah, it's rough. I'm thankful that you definitely, I don't know if it's because of coming from Honda or just like generally who you are as a person who is like, you are this like marketer at heart. So to me, I look at your attention to detail and your eye for what you're trying to put together. It's really great to have somebody that in the conceptual phase of things can really iron out the details ahead of time. So I'm not going in blind into what like, I'm going to film a couple interviews, shoot some stuff, and then what am I putting together? Like the
stakes are too high in B2B, right?
For sure.
It's not like we can just throw more money at the problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was impressed when we were down there and we were talking to, I don't know who spouted the stat off. It was David, I think maybe Bonponte. He was saying that like, KCF has 62,000 sensors plus deployed across like 150 sites all over the place. And I was like, how much is one individual sensor worth? And then and they're not all the same, right? Because some of them are the kind that are wired and not the wireless ones. But just the volume of 62,000 period is really impressive. And
they're a leader. I mean, best in class. we heard from multiple people at that organization that it came from somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And they went there because there's a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
They're an industry leader, and that's a great way to recruit people. So yeah, to put that into scale, 60-some thousand sensors where their competitors might have a few dozen. I mean,
Right.
that was really a special moment that we captured.
Yeah, and like when he said it, I was like, "Whoa!" What? I was like, "Whoa!" Let's back up and circle back to that one real quick.
Yeah,
let's
let's let
talk
that
about that
sink
for
in
a
a
second.
little
Yeah,
bit.
please. And they seemed grateful for it, right? Like, what was funny is that the dynamic I got out of the conversations we had with them was that you were just this like not tool, but like accoutrement that came with this process of collecting the big data. And like, I don't feel like anybody else could have fit into that place because you guys have such a very like acute mission and directive style. So like you guys kind of approach everything from this like preventative maintenance thing. And that's, I guess, like a role already that these companies have. Like, what was it? Ronnie was what was his title? He was a
Maybe reliability specialist,
technician or something like,
yeah.
or maintenance or something like that. And so to me, what's really fascinating is like, I was already kind of into, when I started seeing what the sensors were, I kind of already like loosely knew what they were, but I had like an old V2 sensor. And so seeing the difference between V2 to V3, I was like, oh, this is slick as hell. Like, this thing's cool looking. And then starting to get out there and see where they are in the plants, and then seeing that they're on the same types of assets, like these pumps, these like turbines and all these different little motor pieces. You see them in like every type of manufacturing industry. It's like we're seeing them in Chobani and then in this paper mill. So it's like, what is I'm trying to think who it was we were out with that was saying that they thought something was really, really cool. And they were like, oh yeah, we use this to like pasteurize yogurt or something like that. And he was like, oh, cool. I've also seen it used to like, it was like making something else. I can't remember the thing that he said that it also did, but I remember being like, oh, that's so weird to think that like, yeah, I guess that process would also be the same for that over there.
So a lot similar process. A lot.
There's kind of like a manufacturing revolution that I feel like we don't really talk about in the industrial revolution phase of things. And to see where KCF is kind of like pushing the forefront for, tech and AI and big data and how we're kind of analyzing that. I really get behind the message because to me, it seems like a no brainer. Like I was saying when we were doing the HR video, Zoe, I was talking to, I want to say it was the COO.
Mark or Lou?
Yeah, I think it was Lou actually. And we were talking about, I just made the joke that I was like, I think I could go out and sell this because the thing should sell itself. Realistically, like if you do manufacturing and you handle any sort of volume of production, you have equipment that's going to fail. Like everybody does. It's like, it's not an if, it's a when. Right. And so like when you can, and then finding out from Mo down in Georgia, he was saying like, yeah, it's not just that. It's like, we are also, I'm trying to think of he gave me like a specific audio nugget that I remember listening to. And I remember being like, that's really kind of like an acute understanding of like how perfect this process is, because you are basically, it does sell itself. Like if you're going to have it go down, if a piece of equipment is going to go down, it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And so if you can kind of like open this valve 10% more, or he's like, we discovered through like a history of data that we had collected that we weren't running our machines the way they want to be run. And if you can run them in a way that they like more are attuned to run, then you can basically get longevity out them for days. And then not only are you not having downtime, you're having like extended machine health for the duration of a process that it has to go through.
For an organization like them, it really stems from they've solved the downtime problem.
Yeah,
now
that's
it's
like
about,
secondary to
now.
Now
It's optimizing, right? And automation, and how can we find efficiencies? So there's this progression customers go through from going out manually taking readings off these industrial equipment machines to, okay, let's catch the problem before it exists, and then let's optimize the process so we can eliminate it completely. So definitely a customer journey there.
Yeah. Well, to me, it was like, I hadn't even thought about that, like the evolution of what this data was going to do for them. Like to me, the downtime alone sells the product. So it's easy for you to just be like, okay, well, that's what we'll focus on. And then all that other stuff is like, yeah, they'll figure out what it is for them individually whenever they get involved with it. But to see that was something that I hadn't thought about, I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So this rabbit hole gets a little bit deeper. And, as we kind of discussed this you know, the AI interpretation of this data and how that kind of manifests itself into preventative maintenance practices, and then also like I don't even know what the term would be for like how we functionally run the company in our day to day. It's like that was pretty impressive. I was like, oh wow, and it's something you can only get if you've got the history of data from your specific machinery to be able to work with. So I was really impressed to see that they were like able to tackle that. I mean, it's 62,000 sensors. Yeah, you're going to run into some big numbers and some patterns that you can maybe start to associate the things.
I think AI is a really interesting topic to talk about because, you know, everybody keeps talking about in the news that AI is going to replace all these jobs, but they're not talking about the jobs that it's going to create. And when we were at Georgia Pacific, they were talking about AI has actually created jobs, right? It's empowering people to elevate their work. And we see the same on the marketing side. So right now we haven't been using AI necessarily a lot for creative, for, you know, images and whatnot, but we have used it for narrative writing or creative thought process.
Right.
So AI is changing the game, and certainly ours is significantly.
Well, I think about the hurdles that it really kind of removes, right? Because it's not just like the things that it will eliminate, it will replace with something else. Because, I mean, data still has to be interpreted by the person who's going to execute it and do something with it. And so for me, like AI mixing into video editing to help switch between multiple cameras for like a multiple camera shoot, and having it be able to truncate and get rid of all of like the dead space in between things and make quick cuts, and just Adobe released Firefly, and it's kind of going to start to speed up this process that is really a workflow issue. And 9 times out of 10 is the work that I never want to do. Like, I don't want to sit through, like, I'm so glad that I can, you know, take an interview from Georgia Pacific, and I can go through everybody and I can put them in their own sequence and then say, hey, transcribe this. I need captions for this. Cause I want to be like, to me, I don't know when the fuck this started, but like I started eventually, like Netflix has captions on, HBO Max has captions on. And that's how I do probably predominantly most of my reading. So for me to be able to skim through projects, and I fast forward through things. So like if an interview is, you know, 40 minutes, I think David Bonfante's was 40 minutes before I started truncating it down. Mm-hmm. And I think it's still a pretty lengthy one.
So at what point can you upload those captions and ask ChatGPT to create a 3-minute narrative,
right,
using that information and these characters within the story?
I would imagine that with like something like ChatGPT, you could take the transcription and say, hey, I need to feed you some data, and this data is going to be interviews from different people. And, you know, so here's David's transcription for his interview. Here's his for this, and we can try this experiment if you want to.
We should try.
I have the caption tracks actually. I haven't exported the transcripts, but if you export the transcripts, you're just copying raw text. I was able to kind of like go through. I had to like manually autocorrect some of these captions to kind of make them work. But once they're done, if you can export that transcript, you could probably feed it to ChatGPT and say, I need to tell a cohesive story out of this. These are the parameters that I'm looking for. It's hard because it's doing a lot of writing off of things that already exist. So you're feeding it the information that it's going to draw from. But if I could have it write it in a format where it says, hey, this is the nugget from this person, then all I have to do is find that audio nugget in the timeline and be able to set it there. But we can't be too far. That's one step removed from saying like, yeah, I'm the intermediary. I'm the thing that AI hasn't solved yet, and it's going between ChatGPT and Adobe.
Just think how much less you can charge me then, you know?
Right. I can't wait. I thought we said it wasn't eliminating jobs.
It's creating more because we'll do more work.
Yeah. For less work, for less pay. It's exactly what's going to happen.
The Costco model.
Right.
Volume.
Yeah, classic.
We're going to do volume.
Yeah, actually, I got to pay for a membership to be able to get these jobs. That's actually the next step.
I was going to talk to you about this.
But like, I love that it's kind of helped me eliminate these parts of my job that suck. Like, that's the hardest part, is going through and like, I'm doing it now because I feel like this is an important enough project that it warrants me like going through and doing it that way, and not like ChatGPTing my way into, you know, stardom. But, you know, it is going to be one of those things where eventually it's going to eliminate, just because it can take out the obstacle of like writer's block, or the obstacle of, I don't know how to format a short narrative or short film or whatever, or write a screenplay or whatever. It can do all those things. That doesn't mean that you can then execute on it in a proficient level. And so that's really the real barrier to entry, I think, for me.
I like it from the perspective of writer's block, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So no matter how creative you're feeling, there's things you don't think about. So I like to feed it things and get additional ideas. And I get to those ideas quicker than having to go through like, I love to run, right? So today I went for a 10-mile run. I came up with a bunch of ideas. They're in my phone. They're things I'll execute on later. I don't always have time to run 10 miles, right?
Right.
So I like feeding things into AI, getting its ideas and perspective back, and then picking some of the best things and executing on it.
Yeah, you can cherry pick what you're getting from these
That's right.
these pieces of software and saying like, okay, you know, I like this and this. I hadn't even thought of that thing. But there's still some like it's growing, it's evolving. It's going to have to evolve over another, you know, probably a couple of years. But it makes me really, really curious to see how the next like 5 to 10 go. Because like, you know, when did we get the first iPhone? Where are we now?
True.
Now pretend that ChatGPT is the first iPhone, you know, and now imagine remember what the first iPhone did. Everybody was super stoked when you could have that like beer image on there that if you turned it, it like showed the beer flipping that way. And we were like, what? And now, you know, that's like commonplace. We're like, that's so dumb to even think that we were amazed by that.
Next year, we're going to be doing this interview in the metaverse. It's going to be fantastic. My avatar will be sitting right here.
Yeah. I'll remodel this set. I'll probably be somewhere else.
You don't need the set.
Yeah. I won't even need it anymore. Yeah, I'll be in. I'm real anxious to get to space. I really want to go to space. Voyager's doing some stuff with, what is it? Blue Bezos. Yeah. Bezos space program. They're trying to get it to like commercially available. I'm like, get that client. Let's go to space. Come on. They're going to need sensors on shit. I know they will. But being able to get to space and just be able to see downward, they say that it's a pretty transformative experience. Like every astronaut that goes up says it gives you a whole different perspective on like your place on things. Cause you're like, oh shit, I'm not on that anymore. I'm out here. Anything could be out here. Everything is in space.
I've never really given it much thought, but I did watch recently on Netflix, Elon Musk's, I guess he did this thing he partnered with somebody and he was taking 3 or 4 normal people to space. Have you seen this?
Yeah. They did a documentary on it on Netflix, I think.
Great program.
Yeah.
Great.
And like, I mean, until it gets to the point where things have, I mean, he's doing the Lord's work because like as he continues to send things up, like some of the shuttles that are coming down now, they're on their 11th or 12th, you know, trip up and then back down with successful landings. And you know, he just announced kind of unannounced, he just sort of like randomly dropped that he's got like a space station in mind that he's going to create up there that's going to be like the first private company space station. So I'm like, how do we get into SpaceX? Let me get in the door to the person who they've got things that vibrate. They're going to want to know what nominal vibration looks like and what non-nominal vibration looks like. And getting that heads up early is going to help them.
I support you going to space. I think that'd be highly entertaining.
You don't want to try to run on an artificial gravity treadmill in space where it's just like spinning. All you got to do is run.
I actually don't have a desire to go to space.
That is insane to me.
That is insane.
I can't imagine. You were like so active and like explorative of the world. Why wouldn't you want to see the majesty of the place that you live?
That's a good question. I never really gave it much thought, but I don't know that I have that much interest.
Oh, man. Zoe, will you go to space?
I consider it.
She considered it. So, okay. That's a Zoe gig. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
That's why Zoe's on the team. She'll take that trip.
Yeah, that one and anyone underwater, I feel like. That's another good one.
Zoe always goes to like the places that are like the dirtiest, the nastiest. Like where did we send you? We sent you to a mining facility.
The dustiest.
Frack, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I go to like Chobani where it smells like yogurt and strawberries.
It's almost like you planned it that way.
Yeah, and lucky me, I get to go to all of them. I'm like sitting there like, oh man, I forget, we went to there was a place that was down toward Pensy Supply. There's like a limestone plant, and the dust was I was literally like blowing out like clay boogers for like a day or two. It was bad.
The lumber mill. I remember what that did to our chests with all the dust.
Oh yeah. We were like sneezing the whole hour and a half right over. It's like that's it.
Just waiting. Thought it was COVID in the car.
Yeah.
It's bad.
So
part of the adventure though.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy it. To me, it is. I think coming from a world of touring definitely helped me prep for that because I'm like, you can drop me anywhere, and I'm safe and secure to keep running around and doing whatever I got to do. Oh, we're doing this today. Okay, yeah. Point over there. Okay, I'll go over there now.
Which the whole like going all over the place is always fun to me with you because it's always an adventure, right? We find the most unique places in small town America. We visit them. We have a great time. But I was telling Zoe on the way here that it's really interesting because like I'll be like, Johnny, we're going to be in the car at 5 a.m. And then at 5:15, I'm like, where's Johnny? Because I'm very punctual. I'm actually
Oh yeah,
early
you're
for
like hyper
everything.
punctual.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I the last time it was like I got in the elevator and I pressed down and it stood there for like a minute and I was like, is this fucking with me? Like, it's gonna make me late? It's gonna look. I was in the elevator in plenty enough time. 3 minutes is plenty enough time to get down and downstairs, and then I got down there and I didn't see you down there and you had already gotten the car, I think, or whatever, and pulled it up towards the end of the parking garage. And then we went to that really cool cigar lounge, that speakeasy.
Yeah, that was a cool spot.
The red telephone booth.
Red telephone.
That thing was sick.
So if you're in Atlanta, visit the red telephone booth.
Yeah, any of them. I think there's more than one.
I think there's 2.
That's wild. We don't have anything like that here. I don't really know why. I feel like
State College needs one.
They do. I think Central Reservation next to Local Whiskey, their goal was to have the downstairs underneath Central Reservation be their speakeasy.
That'd be a good idea.
And I mean, it's already set up for it. Like they just got to actually open it and commit to like doing that, and then figure out whatever their passcode system is going to be to get people to, how they find out that passcode. Limited number of people getting in there every night. So what do you see on the horizon for you for KCF for the next like year? Like what's your game plan? Yeah. I feel like we're getting these these company profiles are cool because they really showcase the relationship between KCF and Georgia Pacific. And then the CSC was like, I didn't even know what that was until we got down there. And then I was like, oh, okay, all right. So CSC is like a subdivision of Georgia Pacific that basically
like a department. Yeah,
like a department. And then, but basically, when we were at the Warrenton Lumber Mill, they were speaking about it like CSC and KCF are these alternate companies, like they weren't all under the same umbrella of Georgia Pacific. So it was really interesting to see how they spoke about CSC and KCF sending them data about alerts for things that they had going on.
It's kind of like the mill is the customer of both, right? KCF supports the data. Data is interpreted by CSC, and then the mill's the ultimate one that benefits.
Do they elect to do that just because of like the amount of like proprietary things they have going on in their operations, or?
I can't speak for them, but my view just from that limited exposure in my lens is that the Georgia Pacific is just so innovative that they almost need a team dedicated to managing innovation, right?
Yeah,
and specializing. And that's how they centralize. At least that's my perspective. But you asked a question about what I see over the next year, and our space is really cluttered. If you look at what KCF does, KCF started in 2000 and was one of the original companies focused on what we do.
Like the first 3, wasn't it?
Probably the first one at the scale that we do. But since then, there's like 20 competitors. And the competition is interesting because you have this legacy engineering, marketing, whatever it is, doesn't really talk about the differentiation of how they're different. So we have an opportunity to stand out in a really big way. And over the next year, what I want to double down on is storytelling, because people relate to other people. Right. And that's why when we started working with you specifically, I didn't want to capture stock photography and put it on our website. It's boring. It's lame. It's not relatable. A lot of times it's a Band-Aid, right?
Right.
We wanted to create our own narrative. We wanted to create our own visual appeal. We wanted to tell our story. We wanted people to see KCF in their environment that they reside in. So we started with that visual representation of photography. The next step was really going into video and telling those authentic stories. So we need to do more of that. That's going to be the biggest thing we focus on probably for the next 12 to 18 months.
Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it kind of has to be like a blitzkrieg. Like you want to hit all avenues at all times, always. So like the photos are initially it was kind of like catalog building. Like there was nothing to work with, so it was like anything we can collect now we can start to use. It was funny when I started seeing like, I mean, now I see it's pretty commonplace. You'll send me like a PDF or when we're going to a site to go, like here's like a 10-page PDF of like what our itinerary is for the time that we're down there. You psychopath. And I'll be like,
I didn't think you actually looked at them.
Of course I did, yeah. I mean, I'm the kind of person, if you give it to me, I'm going to look at it. I will never fucking create one. That will never happen. I just don't possess the capacity to do it.
Treat it like a puzzle.
Oh, yeah. It's a puzzle I don't like. I was very specific about the puzzles. Had to do with spaceships most of the time. But yeah, like to me, I think when we were like just sort of like catalog building at first, that was kind of like what I expected it to be, and then I almost feel like now that we've done we've done the St. Croix and the GP one, I'm like, I want to go back to Chobani and tell like their story, because that's such a huge facility, and I feel like we weren't doing interviews really then, so we didn't really do it was more like a sort of like a marketing piece that we were making, and not like a social piece, I guess. And I just feel like in any avenue where you're trying to market, I feel like the best thing you can do is cover all the bases at once. So it's like if you're doing, newsletters, or even if you're doing like print ads for whatever reason you would be doing that. And then, you're also doing the video and stuff. It's just whether or not you have the resources to dump into all those things. But I think video is obviously the clear winner right now because we're addicted to our phones. And so it's easier to get people to watch things there. But the short form content that you guys kind of create, where do you see like the benefit? I'm curious because like from another, like say there's company KCF and then there's company Z over here, and they kind of want to get into they want to get into it, but they're like, they don't know where to start. I had a realty company that hit me up that asked me to do some work for them after they saw the St. Croix video actually. And they ended up going with another vendor, which I told you I thought was going to happen.
Yep.
Because I just didn't pull the punches. I'm like, I'm just realistically like, if you want this to the caliber that you want it to, expect to spend this. And if you get that, you're gonna get a quality piece of content out of that you can repurpose and use. And I tried to explain that to her. I was like, just so you know, this price tag doesn't come at, just a single video cost. Like what you're gonna get out of this is all of the other material that you can utilize however you want to. You could pay me an hourly rate to do some other things later, refunctionally repurposing some of the content that we captured for this thing. But they were kind of a company that didn't really have any vision. They're like, yeah, we kind of want you to do that. I'm like, but I don't work for your company. So like, there's got to be somebody that can share your core values and your mission statement with me in a way that helps me help you promote getting new people to want to come and recruit them to work for your realty company.
Yeah, so like for us, like we go into these big organizations, they're Fortune 100 companies. I think sometimes they think we're going to try to build an infomercial. But at the end of the day, that's
right.
That's not what we want, right?
Airs at 3 a.m.
Yeah. Georgia Pacific's probably the best example of just great work where we were standing them up in the great work that they're doing and how they're elevating people through technology, and inherently it benefits us.
Right.
So yeah, I think the key is getting them on board that it's not about an infomercial selling a specific product. Let's tell a story that makes people's lives better. Let's pull on some emotional heartstrings on why this product makes people better or elevates them in their job, makes it a safer workplace.
Right.
Let's tell that story because that's what's more interesting.
Right.
If you do that and you do that well and authentically, it's inherently going to do well, right? But it's also something people are going to enjoy watching.
Yeah, I think like if I can relate to it in any way, I'm already kind of hooked. And this is one of those sort of things where it's like, I mean, like it or not, most people are consuming Georgia Pacific products, if not in the houses that they live in, with gypsum board and all kinds of stuff, like then also with toilet paper and like any of the other millions of products that they probably make. So, and they already do a really good job. Like I went through the rabbit hole yesterday of their YouTube channel, and I was watching like, how we make gypsum board, how we make this, how we make that, how we make this. And because I think you sent me the link to the how we make lumber one.
Yeah.
But when I watched it, I was like, I mean, no offense to whoever edited that video. I'm sure they're never going to hear this, but I was like not really impressed with like, I got what they were going for, but the style just seemed kind of like, I don't know. It was borderline infomercial. It was like it kind of felt like it was on, and to the degree that they were trying to make a how we make this video, it makes sense, but it wasn't very like, super process specific. It just kind of explained like, hey, this is what we do, this is why we do it, this is where it comes from, this is where it goes. And that just seems like a linear, like it's just a very linear video that doesn't really, I don't connect to that unless I'm curious about how that thing works. If I want to know how lumber is made, then I'm going to find this video, but otherwise I'm never going to stumble upon it. Whereas like when you think about the implications of something with Georgia Pacific and thinking about like the safety issues they deal with, like some of those planer workers that Aaron Mathis was telling us about, he was like, they're missing fingers. Like they're people that have been there for like 30 years that they didn't have a way to get about doing this in a very safe way. Mm-hmm. And, one of the values that he props up and talked about in his interview was that, we want people to go home the way they came here. And, risk of that nature should not be inherent to anybody's job just to show up and be able to collect a paycheck.
It's so inspiring, you know, like you figure they tell stories about losing fingers and catastrophic things that happen. And it's like, we're making an impact on making that workplace safer, right?
Yeah.
There's so many things about what KCF does that is my why that I'm here and that I really enjoy working for the company. It's like growing up, my dad was blue collar electrician, you know, and I remember times when the union would send him home and he'd be laid off.
Right.
You think about manufacturing and how that translates. These guys that are going into the plants and working their asses off, they depend on that job to be safe, reliable, and there every day.
Yeah, they got to do it every day.
So if we can help make that process or that manufacturing plant more efficient, more effective, it helps make sure that that plant exists.
Yeah.
And every time we go to one, it's in small town America, right?
Yeah.
Where it's the biggest employer in town.
Yeah, we fly into the hub of whatever Georgia Pacific's main, like offices, obviously in Atlanta,
And then drive 2 hours.
but we're driving 2 hours to Warrenton to this like lumber mill to be able to see where the how the sausage gets made, basically. That is pretty interesting. I think that I didn't anticipate the ramifications of what this technology really kind of does for the individual. Like we showed up and it was like the first comment you made when we were walking into the lumber mill. You're like, it's crazy to think that we're helping these people in their day-to-day lives basically operate safer, eliminating the parts of the job that they probably hated the most. Like running routes sounds like an abysmal job.
We heard that, right?
Yeah, like these dudes having to run around with like a wand and like tapping it to something and getting a measure. And then you think about user error, right? Like two people take different, they're not tapping in the exact same place, or maybe they're not holding it the same way or whatever it is. There's all this opportunity for sort of like faulty information to make its way into the data that you're collecting. And it's so slow that you can't do it fast enough to be able to do anything beneficial with it, because you're like, oh, if this goes down in the next month, I wouldn't know that it was going to, because it may be operating fine now and then trending towards failure over the next 15 days, and I wouldn't have another reading on it for another 15 days after that, and it failed at day 16 or whatever.
Totally.
So like when I think about the individual stories, it's interesting to me that because we're in so many different because you guys are in so many different manufacturing facilities, there's like almost like a litany of stories that are there to kind of be told. So it's kind of nice that this is like endless well of stories to get through. We'd spoken about getting to Toyota and Hyundai, and like I'm excited to get to there because I personally I've been a Hyundai car owner since 2005, and so for me that's a long period of time to be stuck with any company. And my dad's a Chevy guy, so like never in a million years did I think I would ever be into a Korean car company, but here we are. And, that 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty is pretty hard to beat whenever you're a college undergrad getting ready to go through. You're like, I just need this car to get me through the next 10 years.
Yep.
And it got me through like 15, and then I got a new one.
You know, an interesting stat, I was just talking to our automotive team, and we actually work with 5 of the 8 domestically produced automotive manufacturers in the U.S. Pretty soon, we'll probably be at 6 of the 8.
Who's the 6th? Can you say?
I can't say.
Damn.
But
Off air.
6 of them, you think about, have a competitive advantage over the other 2 that aren't doing anything.
Yeah, you're at 3/4 of them.
And we know they're not doing anything because we've been there.
Have you tried to sell to them and they haven't done it?
We'd love to help them.
We'd love to help them. That's an excellent way to phrase that.
That's at the end of the day, that's what we do, right?
Yeah, man. That's what I said. It sells itself.
I don't know if it sells itself, but it definitely provides a lot of value.
The value of knowing that whatever they're going to spend, they're like some of these things, like
Well, listen to this, because this is about marketing, right?
Yeah.
We studied all of our customers all of last year, okay? Our customers received 21 times ROI. So every dollar they gave us, we gave them basically 21 back.
Right.
That's all documented. It's valid by the customer. But we can't market it because nobody will believe it. It's too high. So we actually market 10, which is half of what the true value is.
Oh, man, there's something to be said for just being ridiculous and being like, it doesn't, just because it sounds too good to be true doesn't always mean that it is, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, but it's the reality, and
that's sad that people won't buy it
it sounds too good to be true.
It's too much savings. I don't buy it, and knock it down a little bit so I can believe it a little bit.
Even our not best in class customers see at least 3 to 5 times ROI. 3 to 5.
Yeah.
Imagine if I gave you $1 and you gave me back 5. I would do that deal all day long.
Yeah.
All day.
If it's not broke, don't fix it. Yeah.
I got $300 right now. You want to give me $1,500?
$1,500 right now? Yeah, I mean, to me, that's
You just knock it off the GP video.
That's why. Yeah, there you go. That's why. That's why this thing I think sells itself. I think if you're, like I said, if you're producing at scale at volume, you have these pieces of machinery that are going to go down, and that's like a very like. And you guys started branching out into other territory, not just vibration, but like, wasn't there a radiation sensor?
No radiation, but I mean, yeah, we have our hub, which we've seen at you saw at PACCAR, you saw at
I've seen them everywhere.
GP, you've seen them everywhere. That thing takes in MCSA data. It takes in oil quality. It takes in legacy, sensors. It takes in IEPE sensors. It takes on so much. I mean, literally, everybody out there that we compete with, for the most part, is selling a vibration sensor. We're selling a full machine health platform.
Right.
So it's bringing all of the stuff together, because nobody wants to have 10 different platforms.
That you have to figure out how to integrate all that and then cross communicate. Yeah, that you eliminate that part of it and put it all in one package basically to make it like a no-brainer.
You get better intelligence that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the comment that I'm hearing from all the people that we interview too. Like the Aaron Mathis, he was saying, he was like, this is a no-brainer. Like doing this made absolute sense. Like there's no scenario where I want to not get the phone call at 2 or 3 in the morning when something's going to go down and we need to fix it. But like, I mean, he would gladly not have that happen to him. But if it has to happen to him, at least it happens to him in a way where he's like, oh, I can get there and fix this in 45 minutes, as opposed to having to be a day and a half of downtime and costing us, several $100,000 worth of downtime.
Yeah. Well, just think about when we were in Maine, right, at St. Croix Tissue, the idea of having to wake up at 3 in the morning to be at the mill at 4 to take a reading.
Yeah.
It only makes sense to apply some of the hub technology, so maybe you can just check it from bed and be like, you know what, I'm clear. I don't have to go in early today.
Yeah.
That particular individual, I think, worked a 12-hour day that day, maybe longer, right?
Yeah.
And those are the things that make people's lives better.
Yeah. Do you enjoy the impact that like you get? Are you kind of like tech savvy from the beginning? Like, were you always kind of like into the tech world?
No. I always love, like when I call IT and I'm like, hey, I'm experiencing this problem with my computer. And they're like, did you restart it? And I'm like, yes, that's the only thing I know how to do.
Yeah. I've heard it for the last 15 years. I know how to restart the machinery.
Yeah. Now it's you. Now I need your help. I'm phoning a friend here. No, I wouldn't say I'm super tech savvy. Definitely tech dependent, which I think is very a millennial trait, is being tech dependent, maybe not tech savvy, which I think the two get commonly confused.
I think it's probably good that you're not, if you're coming from the marketing perspective, because it lets you kind of approach things from like a more layman perspective of like what is going to translate to people that don't like. I'll get into the numbers, I'll get into the weird shit, like the things that are interesting and quirky about like the tech itself. But for you to be able to say, how does this translate to the person that we're trying to snipe as a new client, by explaining how this is going to help and benefit them. Well,
just think about, we were having this conversation in Atlanta, like somebody was saying that the news used to be written at a 8th grade reading level, and now it's a 5th grade. But I truly believe, like, based on what my kids are doing in school, 5th grade is the new 8th grade. But you have yeah, it's true. I mean, my kindergartner is doing math that I did in 3rd grade.
They're so smart, man. So smart. Like there's pros and cons to them having this tech available to them so early.
Information's more accessible now, right?
Yeah.
So it makes a huge impact. But when we explain things from a marketing perspective, we're explaining to multiple generations with different levels of tech savviness.
Yeah.
And I think of my dad, for example. He was an electrician. He ran big projects, nuclear facilities, hospitals. I remember back in the day, he'd bring home these huge blueprints, bigger than this table, right? And over the weekend, he'd be planning his work for the next week for all of his employees. Later on, that stuff translated to the computer. And that particular generation might not have been the most computer savvy. He had to learn the computer just to do his job. And he's a younger boomer. And he did do that, right? But you think about, like, when you're selling technology, you're selling to multiple different personas and different levels of tech savviness, I guess.
Yeah, education levels, all kinds of it. Yeah, I mean, like, what I also, I guess one of the other things I enjoy about this is like when we meet someone like real, like the true blue collar, like good old boys that are working in some of these facilities, like they don't just embrace the technology, like they like flaunt its laurels. They're like, oh man, this is like the best thing that's ever happened to me, because now I don't gotta stick my hand in this little hole that we carved out so I can go get this reading next to this fan blade that could likely take my finger off. Like, I just know that if it's in the right position and it's not moved, it's going to be giving me a reading. I can detect it. And actually, Ronnie, one of the things that I picked up in hindsight after reviewing his interview footage was he can actually tell when the orientation of the sensor has been shifted. Like if somebody puts it back on, but they don't stick it on with the XY the right way, he's like, I can tell whenever that's what the problem is, and I can go over there and take care of it.
Yeah, it's funny, like relating some of their stories. So about a year after I started with KCF, I thought about it, and my uncle Rob, who lives 45 minutes from here, he used to run maintenance for a paper mill. And I called him and I said, hey, can you tell me more about what it was like to run maintenance at the paper mill? And he's telling me about it. He worked all 3 shifts. And I said, well, how did you know if something was going wrong? Right? I wanted to hear it from him because he would be brutally honest with me. And he's like, I could just hear it. I could walk up and I could listen, and I knew it. Sometimes I'd put a screwdriver up to the machine. I'd hear it if it sounded like rocks, it's cavitation, this, that. I said, okay, how's the next generation of employees knowing what's wrong with the machine? He's like, they don't. He goes, but we got all these college educated, use maybe a curse word in there, guys coming around with their computers, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I'm like, really? I'm like, tell me more about that. So he tells me more about it.
This is after you started at KCF?
Yeah. And he goes, well, what are you doing now? And I'm like, oh, I'm kind of one of those college educated guys walking around with a computer.
Yeah.
But in my heart, I did vocational school.
Right.
And for 3 years, and auto mechanic by trade. I get the mechanical piece, but truly empowering people with technology is what's going to make the biggest impact to elevate them faster, right? Everybody starts learning from a certain level, but if you can get them and rise them up faster, that's what we need, because there's a huge labor shortage right now, just huge.
What does the labor shortage look like? Like, is this because of like COVID? Is this because of like people like retiring, or?
I think it's skilled trades. I give you a great example. We're doing a project with Metro State University of Denver. They have an advanced manufacturing program. It includes 3 different educational facilities in the greater Denver area. Right now, we have a few sensors deployed, just kind of in a trial period. But we went to the local vocational school where they had, I think, welding and a few other disciplines. And I walked in. It looked very much like the vocational school I went to just down the road in Altoona. And I saw like 10 people. And I'm like, how big's the class? Is it off today? And they're like, no, this is it.
This is full class.
I'm like, wow. I'm like, what's the deal? And they're like, people just are not enrolling in skilled trades. That's a huge problem to have.
Is it a pay issue? Is it like I mean, specifically dealing with like the inflation we've been going through over the last year, I could see certain people being like, well, what's the point? Like, I can't get ahead and I'm risking my fingertips if I take this job, and it's only going to pay me this or that or the other thing. And I come from like a service industry background. So for me, I was like quite content to make $2.83 an hour for way too long to be able to turn around and make, cash in hand to walk out with at the end of the night in tips. And so it's a big transition for me to think about, like, I didn't go into I did roadway construction for, I'm going to say like 8 months after I got out of high school, because my mom worked for Glen O'Hawbaker. She was like a scale house operator and a dispatch person. And she got me a job where I could be flagging for the summer. And she was like, just see if you like it. If you like it, you can stick with it. It's good pay. I'll make sure you get on some good jobs, yada, yada, yada. And so she sent me out with like a certain foreman or a crew, and I'd have to drive my own car like 3.5 hours, get up at like 4 a.m, drive there, stand around all day, or move this or drive this up and down the road 50 times. And she got a job offer at Penn State University, and she was like, hey, I'm going to take this job offer at Penn State. I think you should think about going to college because you'll get a tuition discount. And I was like, fuck roadway construction. I'm out of it. Like, I was just like, I'm not going to do it. I have like, this is not me. I was getting home and I was exhausted. I could see how like my attitude at the end of the day just sucked. I was just so miserable. I was like, you just want to eat and go to bed. And I'm like, this cannot be my life. This will not be my life. Like, I'm not going to do this. And so I feel like skilled trades are something that you kind of have to have people that fill in that role as sort of like a labor of love. I think people that you have to be like genuinely passionate about doing that thing, Or you got to be like, oh, there's like, if you're a welder, you can be like, oh yeah, I'm going to be an underwater welder and make $350 an hour. Like that's going to be my gig because it pays really well. And it's kind of a cool thing to tell people I do or whatever. There are different things that lead people to trades. And so I feel like pay is certainly one of them. And then,
maybe. And I don't know the answer, but what I do know, what I have observed is people feel like manufacturing facilities are the ones that their grandparents were going into.
right.
The ones we're going into, you and I, have a lot of advancement, a lot of technology. It's different. It's not that dark, dingy, gloomy place
Right.
that our grandparents went to work every day. And I think that gets missed a lot. I'm just so impressed with our partners and how they're executing with technology to make the places safer, cleaner, more environmentally friendly. There's just so many aspects that I think manufacturing is just a great industry to get into. I really believe that.
Well, it's not going anywhere, right? Like
It
we
isn't.
need things to be made. Things are going to be being made for the next.
But I'll give you an example, right? I just was watching one of our partners actually in the automotive industry. It used to be that you might go into a car manufacturing facility and there's one person doing the same job every day, 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
right? 5 days a week. Now they're cross-training into different departments, getting different skill sets and doing different things, different tasks. It's not the monotony that it used to be, right? Like
Right.
you watch the old Henry Ford videos of designing the assembly line. Those guys were doing the same thing over and over. Nobody wants to do that,
Right.
right? So now if you can get cross-trained and exposure to different parts of the process and how important your part of the process is to the next person downstream, now it makes your job more important.
Yeah,
right?
you have perspective on like the value that each position kind of has and how
Yeah.
how they all interplay into each other to do like the row in the same direction. Yeah, I feel like that was one of the things we touched on with Georgia Pacific too. I think Aaron Mathis also said that. He was like, we don't have like a university nearby. 'Cause I kind of asked him coming off of like St. Croix had a lot of crossover from the University of Maine. Like some of those kids lived in that area, went to UMaine, and then they come back and they work at this paper and pulp place. It's like near them and close to home, close to their communities. And that was not really something that was going on at Warrenton. He was like, we do still have a lot of younger people that come in because of the tech that's available. It's not the same kind of process that you're used to thinking about. I mean, there's so much automation that has taken place with moving things now from point A to point B, especially in a linear facility like Warrenton's lumber mill is, that a lot of the times you're really just kind of like maintaining and just checking up on things and making sure that this is like the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think about my great grandfather, right? From Altoona down the road, he worked up the mountain in a place that made bricks. And if you look at the pictures, those black and white pictures of them making bricks and moving bricks around the brickyard, that job had to be terrible, right?
Right.
Exhausting.
Yeah.
You're doing the same process. It's hard wear and tear on your body. But you go into a plant that's semi-automated doing the heavier lift, but you're the one making the empowered decisions
yeah,
on how the process works. That's a very rewarding career.
yeah, definitely.
Very much different than packing bricks in the early 1900s.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely would not want to be a part of that. I could not be born on any other century in time. I'd be miserable. I'd be miserable.
I think you would have a hard time waking up for that 6 a.m. shift.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'd be fired immediately. I'd be the guy at the fucking soup kitchen, just like, please, sir, can I have some more of whatever this is? But so I wanted to get back to where we're going with like some of the future projects. Like, what is when you think about like what KCF's doing versus what your competitors aren't doing? You obviously don't want to give them a competitive edge, but like, where is it that you feel that they fail? Is it that they're not really all encompassing? They don't really have the infrastructure built in place to kind of have everything be, in one place? Because you guys basically did that. You've created like the Apple store for manufacturing to come into and say, oh, we want to implement all these processes where you guys are like, oh yeah, we can do that for you.
Yeah. There's multiple things. From a marketing perspective, I think it's there for the taking to talk about how we're different. Differentiation. Why KCF? We have such a great story to tell. We have a great heritage. We did a lot of work for the DOE, DOD, Black Hawk helicopters and submarines. We've just been in this space and we've had so many learnings over the last 23 years that can apply to advancing technology even further, faster. Our competition, and there's some great competitors out there. There's no doubt about it. A lot of them have sprung up more recently. They're moving fast. They're taking chances, I believe, because we hear some feedback from customers that upgrade to KCF. I think we just are tried and true. We have a great foundation to position ourselves to be the best from a customer experience, customer support, and ultimately make an impact on the business. So I think it's the tried and true. That sometimes that's the best route. We have probably the most data. Now data is so important.
Yeah.
There's so many facets. We were just talking about like our engineering support. We've had hundreds of analysts go through industry standard Mobius training, like a couple hundred that are certified vibration analysts. Our competition doesn't have that.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen overnight. They probably have some, right?
Yeah.
But that's a standard. We hold ourselves to a pretty high standard.
Well, one of the things I noticed through doing the HR video is a lot of people talked about like the ability to learn these like skilled learning, like online modules that you were able to go through to kind of just basically a la carte pick up whatever you want to learn, and they encourage you to do that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. We recently compared ourselves to like our top 12 competitors, and when you look at how many have that like learning management platform, whether it's for internal or external, we have probably the most robust learning platform.
Right.
I mean, we're really a culture centered around education and learning, continuous education, continuous improvement.
Yeah, it didn't seem like you were trying to like suit people up so that they were like necessarily only ever going to be able to be heavy hitters for you. You were like, we're setting you up with tools for success in life, period. If there's an avenue or something you want to learn or something you're curious about or something you want to dive into, even just to like dip your toes and get them a little wet, like you have that opportunity to do that here. And I think ultimately when people want to learn, if you give them like unfettered access to the ability to do that, it only kind of invests back into the company in terms of how you never know what that one module they're going to learn. And then that one engineer is going to, or one analyst is going to catch something thinking about this thing that they just picked up and be like, hey, is it possible that this could be the thing? And then you, lo and behold, have some big save.
It's interesting, like our culture, just like everybody at the company is curious. They're curious to learn. They're curious to solve tough problems. They're curious about what other departments are doing. They're curious about how they can make a customer more successful. It's probably the most curious environment I've ever been in, and that curiosity leads to results.
Yeah.
Even our marketing team. So I'll give you an example. We did have a marketing ad agency, and they did okay. That's B2B is their space. But we felt like being closer to the product and knowing the true problems that our customers have, we could do a better job internally.
Yeah.
So our marketing team is all built in-house, just like an ad agency, but we're close to solving problems. We're close to understanding the pain points that our customers go through.
Right.
Which inherently, I think, makes our products that we put in the marketplace better.
Well, that's the difference, right? Like if you hire an ad agency to go out and do the same video that we just did, right? They're gonna get you maybe in the vicinity of what you were trying to go for, but without you're there with me while we're doing the interviews. So like if there's anything I miss or vice versa, yeah, like tag teaming the interviews like that is good because I come from a slightly different perspective. And so when we're able to kind of work on that together, we really round out not missing anything in that moment that we could capture that is going to be valuable for the post-production side of things, just for like the editing side of things for me, but also for like what the longer lasting impact for that video can end up being.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's not a knock against ad agencies because I've worked with some of the best in the world.
But that's not their focus, right?
It's not their focus necessarily. Our space is a little bit niche. You have a great understanding from working on multiple projects where you might work with an agency that brings in the most available photographer, videographer, or producer at any given time, but they're not becoming an expert refined in that space, right? The more work we do together, the better the work gets because you have a better understanding of what we do, how we do it, what questions we should be asking, the value proposition.
Yeah.
And talking about curiosity, you're one of the most curious people I've ever met.
Yeah, certainly.
So like, some of those interviews, I know sometimes I put the time out and like, hey, let's reverse back to this.
Yeah.
But your curiosity is also pulling out great information.
Yeah, and I find that when it comes to the actually assembly process of these kind of things, especially when it comes to threading that needle, sometimes there's a repeat sentence made that is just said slightly differently, and it may come off the back of a question that I asked that was kind of extracurricular, but then turns around and ends up being this like perfect nugget to use instead of the original delivery that was given when we asked the question and we were trying to get that answer out of. So part of it is kind of fishing to get these extra rounds and visits on these exact same discussion points because they're going to tie it into something a little bit differently or whatever. And I guess, again, that's that part of that puzzle making and puzzle piecing together that I enjoy doing.
Are we going to see the preview of this piece of art that you're working on while we're on the podcast today?
No. I'm not going to do it on the podcast, but I do have, it's not done yet. My goal is to have V1 done and ready to roll by Friday. And then actually
This Friday or next?
This Friday.
Okay.
I got Drew hit me up asking about the HR video this week, and I was like, it's right behind this this Georgia Pacific video. I was like, I'm gonna get to it. I was like, I've got a video coming to you guys by next week, next Friday, end of day for the HR video.
Are you sure you don't want to debut the work in progress so we could talk about it on the podcast? That'd be kind
No, because it has nothing right now. Right now, I mean, if I were to do it from like an actual fundamental perspective of showcasing like what's going on here, I'd have to explain what isn't there that's going to be there because my process is more. I start with the interviews to get the dialogue laid out first, so I have it in a way that I enjoy hearing it.
Sure.
And then the music is there as like a placeholder bed. It may be that music, it may not be that music, and if it switches, the shifts in the music and the changes might alter the way I like space some things out a little bit. But it's really just like in its like teenage phase right now of like being put together because I don't know if I necessarily love the way I have certain things stacked next to each other. It's just gonna be an interesting balance because like you have to open up that video specifically. We're talking about the CSC's involvement with Georgia Pacific and functioning with KFC and how they kind of act as a liaison for the KCF. Oh my God.
How long have you been doing this?
I know, too long apparently. I'm getting dementia. But in the process of doing it, you have to open the right way. Like usually the thing that holds me up the most is like, how do I open this? What is the right way to open this? It's like, well, what is the emphasis of this video supposed to be?
It's got to be a high impact because really, truly the first 3 seconds are the most important. Like you got to capture somebody's attention right out of the gates.
Right.
And this doesn't have the emotional piece that St. Croix and University of Maine.
Right, because that was it was a more nuanced kind of story about like how a coming of age story of this college graduate who goes to work for this. Yeah, it worked out perfectly.
Beautiful story. This one's different. This has to be high impact out of the gates.
Right, and so pacing is going to be super important, and especially because we have so many. We interviewed too many people for this thing. I have so much to pull from. So it's like everybody either gets 15 seconds of screen time or some people are going to talk a lot and we're going to get rounded out bits from other people and maybe somebody gets left on the cutting room floor. Like it's just going to come down to how we're able to tell the narrative the best way. Because for me, my metric for success in this is whether or not you're like, okay, yeah, I like that you said it like that. That's how I want it to be said. Or we need a little faster pace than this. It's like, okay, well then now I got to figure out how to take these elongated discussion points that they make and how do I kind of cross jump between each person's discussion of similar things to round out one full point, and does it make sense if they are saying it differently? It's a dance. I honestly I enjoy it because it's like it looks like shit for like the longest time, and then all of a sudden you're like in the final 5 hours you're like, oh, it starts to come together, and now this is a presentable thing that I can put out into the world and I'm like actually functionally proud of. And
I did enjoy was it yesterday? I was like, how's it going? And you're like, oh, the train's chugging along. And I'm like, well, chug, like,
yeah,
speed that train up.
Starts having whip cracking sound.
Typical client, right? Like,
yeah. Listen, in the long line of clients from hell, you guys are nowhere near that. You are
in the long line of clients from hell.
You are not in that list at all. You guys are hands down one of my favorite clients to work with, just because you appreciate what I do. I tend to give you the quality that you're looking for visually and like just thematically, like the way I kind of compose. Even just like the actual composition of a shot individually, it's a photo or a video. You're like, yeah, this is what we're looking for. That gives me peace of mind that what I'm doing for you guys is what you're looking for. And if that changes and we begin to evolve and you're like, we kind of want to see a little bit more of this or whatever, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Give me a reason to go buy a new piece of equipment to do this thing that I want to do that gets me the shot that I want. I'm very interested in reverse engineering the things, much like you said at the very beginning. Like you're good at taking this end result that you're looking for and kind of dissecting it and reverse engineering it so that we can get there in a trajectory that makes sense and is actually feasible. And so for me, that's basically what I have to do in 2 different ways. 1 from the original vision, and then 2 from what we actually capture and how I have to like reconstruct all of that to kind of piecemeal together something that works in a, hopefully a unique and profound way. So
I'm very much looking forward to Friday.
yeah, me too. Me too. Cause I'm like, this project has been stressing me out because the St. Croix one, I had a little bit of lead time to be able to get that done. And then this one, we're like, we filmed it 2 weeks ago, and within 2 weeks, I'm trying to get you this edit. So it's like, there's a more of like a pace to it. And I've had other client work in between then and now that's kind of like kept me from getting it done. Anything I realistically I could do in a week, easy. But like, ultimately, the thing that takes the most time is we have 40-minute interviews, and there's no way to get through that except for to review that and pull the nuggets out. And so when you've got 8 interviews, it's like, that's just review time. And then you have to review multiple times until you start seeing, like, I do it in this thing called cycling. And so it's like, I'll take a look at everything, and then I'm like, I'm going to get away from it for a day. Cause then I start to think about shit in the back, like just subconsciously, I guess. And then I'll turn around and come back, and I have like more of a defined way to start plucking and pulling things out of there, which is what that's basically what this week is like, I've had my time to review the stuff now. Now it's like going back there, getting those nuggets out from each part and putting it together, and then seeing if I'm doing it in a way that it feels like it's fluid. Fluidity is like the biggest part. Like, one, you got to capture them in the first 3 seconds, but then you also have to be able to make it something so it's like, the transitions between people speaking don't feel clunky. Like, St. Croix really came together well because we had everybody knew what the story we were telling was. And so it was easy to kind of interview them and get the answers that kind of lead us in that direction. Sure. This one is a little bit more scattered. So it's like, okay, how I use everybody has to be, it's like seasoning in a dish. You just got to really sparsely. Am I using a little bit of parsley here? Okay. That's Ronnie. Ronnie's the parsley. Okay. And then over here, we've got this. So it's cooking basically. But,
well, I know you don't like to play favorites, but I'm okay if we're your favorite client.
You guys are, hands down.
Okay.
It's not even up for debate. I tell everybody, I'm like, they're not just my bread and butter. They're my favorite client. Like, you guys let me run rampant. You trust me with my vision for helping execute what your guys' ideas are. And, I'm very interested in the tech space, and you guys are in this like big data, AI, basically analysis mode of being able to sift through like insane amounts of data to find things that are really impacting lives in the day-to-day sense. And that to me is really cool, because like, I'm not actually doing that, but I'm fundamentally helping tell those stories. Yeah. And so it's really impactful to me to be like, I am low-key helping this, to spread, because if this story helps another company decide to pull the trigger, it's like, cool, then we're doing more out there to start making a lot of this industrial manufacturing facility space safer. And I mean, that's my dad, most of my family are like blue collar workers. And so for me, it's like, I guess like the stigma for me was I was this little prissy boy. I was a crier as a kid. I cried all the time. I skinned my knees. I bawl. I was the biggest crybaby of all time. Like, my mom will tell you openly in front of very important people. And so I kind of got this reputation that I was just like this little prissy boy, but that prissy boy turned into being able to, create things that ended up eventually helping them with the things that my then siblings and nieces and nephews and cousins and stuff are now working in, like, factories and facilities and things like that.
With how curious you are about what we do, when can we schedule Jeremy Frank to be on your podcast?
I would love to have him on it. We jumped into it for the HR video. I just kind of like threw it out as like a feeler to see how he felt about AI. And man, you see his eyes light up in the video. Like, whenever you start seeing him, like, all the other topics are like, okay, we got to talk about how great the culture here is, yada, yada. And everybody does it in their own words, and they mean it. I didn't get to say it earlier, but it's almost obnoxious how much like the people at KCF enjoy their jobs. Like, there aren't any unhappy people there that I've met.
I got to tell you, though, when you're making an impact like you can at KCF, it's like, it's hard to not like what you do.
And you see it. Yeah. Like, you're not just making the impact and not knowing it. You're making the impact, and you're very well aware of it, because you're dealing with it pretty much all around you with what you're seeing and observing in office and where, where it extends to. It'd be interesting do you guys do like a company retreat, or is that what the summit is?
No, we don't do a retreat. The summit's its own event, which, by the way, we did a walk through the State Theater today. Yeah. It's going to be so buttoned up. We're so excited for this year. We have nearly 200 people coming to State College for this thing.
So it's up from the last time we talked when we were in Atlanta. You were like, worried about
Yeah, all in, we could be 200 to 250 people.
Well, that's awesome. I'm excited.
And you think about that, like, you have to be making an impact in industry to get that many folks to come to State College, Pennsylvania for a manufacturing conference on 2 specific days in June. Right. It's going to be a home run. We're super excited. Everything's buttoned up, dialed in. You're going to be there. You'll be capturing it. Yep. It's going to be a good one this year.
Yeah, I'm excited. But yeah, so I think like I would love to have Jeremy on the podcast. I hope that, you know, he is open to doing it.
Yeah, we'll get it booked.
Yeah, man, he's like a local legend really in his own right, because he's straight from Penn State. He's literally literally across the corner from where Penn State is now in the Met building, and you know, one of the nicest buildings downtown to have like an office.
Isn't it nice?
It's so nice. It's so empty because everybody's working from home and stuff from COVID. I went in, I was like, who works here? The day we had to do the HRB roll, we were running around, and luckily people started to show up at around the time when I was getting ready to roll out. So I just stuck around for a little longer and just kept capturing.
Is it true that you were holding your camera and walked right into some of our glass?
Yeah. Is that what you told him about that?
I was on the phone. I think,
Testament to how clean that glass was. I just straight up walked right in. I was like, dink. I was like, oh, I was looking at the monitor. So in the monitor, I've got a polarizer filter on the front of the camera, so there's no reflection that I'm seeing. So I just literally tink.
I think I heard it on the other side of the call.
Yeah, you were on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were on that Zoom call. That's totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Way to take me back to that. Well, dude, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah.
I know we got a little bit of review to do, so I'm excited to show you what I have so far and kind of do some brainstorming to kind of, I'd like to be able to like comb through some of the interviews and stuff like that with you. Perfect. To see like what parts you remember that you liked. And yeah, man, I'm just really glad that you finally got to come on. We've been talking about it forever.
Thanks for having me. I really thought Rogan was gonna be my first one, but as we sat there in the car, I think on the way to Idaho, to Maine, to Atlanta, I'm like, you know what? This is like what we do in the car. Like, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I say that to everybody. I'm like, I have people that want to come on and we'll be out somewhere at a bar or whatever. We're just out and about and we're talking. And I'm like, save this. Like, let's just come on and talk about this if we want to talk about this. We'll do like a comedians and cars getting coffee kind of setup whenever we start traveling from now on. I'll set some GoPros up on and little.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, that'll be great.
We should do that
and get our car conversations. Because then
I don't know about that. I don't know if I want some of that public.
No. We use it for review. We'd be like, hey, we said some things on the way back that we were thinking about when we were coming fresh off the grill of being in this manufacturing plant, that if we don't write them down in that moment, or we don't like, you know, that string that ties two things together that we're paying attention to when we're right out of the facility, that we might lose between then and whenever it gets to the cutting room floor. So
that sounds good.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, Johnny.
We'll have you on again.
Deal.
Boom.
In the metaverse.
Yeah. Next one's metaverse.
We're always collaborating at all times with the universe.
That is a wrap on another episode of the Collab or Die podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed making this episode for you. And now it's time for our favorite part of the show, the part where I beg you to please hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you never miss an episode. And don't be shy. Give us a shout out on social media at Collab or Die podcast on all the cool platforms to share your thoughts, your feedback, and your love. Until next time, Collab or Die, baby.